Hey, good evening, everybody. Got a bit of cirrus coming across our part of Texas, and you can see the 22-degree halo up there, indicating ice crystals streaming overhead, and out to the west you can see sheaves of cirrus. And this is a cloud that's called High Cloud 2. It's a little bit different from the High Cloud 1, which is kind of like your classic cirrus with long stringy tails, that kind of thing. All right, let's head to the charts and see what's going on across the U.S. Well, we've got another storm system heading our way, and we can see that out there in Arizona and Utah. And what's important to keep in mind here is we've got a front down to the south, right down here in South Texas and northern Mexico, and that's due to all this extensive Canadian air up to the north. So we're getting a few days of cold air advection bringing air south and southwestward, and that's not only bringing the temperature down, but it is drying out parts of the southern U.S. And I've also added the mixing ratio. And let me see if I can pan that to the south a bit, and you can see what's happened to the better moisture. Now, yesterday we were talking about how mixing ratio is similar to dew point, except it's kind of sensitive to the higher values. One thing I wanted to also add is the 10 gram per kilogram line is close to 10 Celsius, which is about 50 Fahrenheit. So let's plot that on there. Plot the dew points, and yeah, you can see the 50 is right offshore there, and Texas is covered by 30s and 20s. So the better moisture lurking down to the south, and you have to go all the way down to Monterey there to find dew points near 60. We can take a closer look at the air mass with the mesoscale depiction, and I'll see if I can add a few more charts, a few more plots on here. And we do want to pan that down to the south a little bit, because down south is where we're expecting the next round of showers and storms, probably as early as tomorrow. So right now we can see dew points down there along Interstate 10 are very dry, mid to upper 20s, and even down around Sanderson only about 40. And the other aspect of this is the front. We can see 81 at Presidio with the temperature reading there. And then you go out to Marfa, 69, 71 there at Fort Stockton. So, yeah, mid-70s. This is all pretty cool air. So there's a good chance the front is going to be kind of off the chart, way down there to the south. And that's probably going to be returning north as a warm front. So already we have a pretty good idea what to be looking for down there in Texas, because obviously this is where the first of our weather is going to start up. Now let's see if I can bring up the potential temperature. And this gives us an idea where the highest temperatures are. This is kind of factoring out the elevation. So we can see that just ahead of that front there, New Mexico, very warm readings, and we would expect to find that on the soundings. And very likely down in this region we've probably got that warm front, just in proximity to this thermal ridge, but well to the south of this gradient that you see here. So likely our warm front is set up something like that right there. And you notice how it goes kind of north-south there. So we've probably got warm temperatures there in Colorado also. Okay, so there is the setup, and let's head to the charts. Now I guess as we get into convective season, I'll probably start using some of these College DuPage graphics to start out the webcast. And we can see that at this time, let me roll this up. Yeah, that's the current time right there. Upper level low over Nevada. Pretty strong jet, rounding the base of the trough there around Los Angeles, and then extending out towards the Four Corners and southeastern Utah there. Let's see what's going to happen to that trough over the next day or so. In fact, we'll advance this up to about midday tomorrow. Now you notice something kind of interesting here. This kind of relates to dynamics. Take a look at the winds going into this jet max. The jet max located right there. This is tomorrow afternoon. Jet max over Silver City to about Truth or Consequences south of Albuquerque there. And the flow going into that jet max, you notice that it seems to originate from higher heights. It kind of crosses the height contours kind of like that. And these are the height contours here. And you notice that there's kind of the opposite effect on the other side. Now typically with upper level flow, we've got something more like you see up north, like in this region. You see how they're kind of aligned with the upper level flow pretty much everywhere on the chart, but there's something unusual going on out there in Texas and in California. So what we're seeing here, this is a geostrophic flow, and that's one of the things that is so important in causing weather. Geostrophic flow by itself actually produces very little weather. So obviously there's some very significant dynamic effects taking place. So what we're seeing here, this is a subgeostrophic and supergeostrophic flow. This is where the flow is out of balance, in other words, ageostrophic. When we talk about forces acting on the upper level flow, like you see right here, or actually anywhere on the chart, we'll say this point right here in Minneapolis. You can see the winds are out of the west-northwest, moving to the east-southeast at about 70 knots there. At that particular point in space, that parcel is mostly being acted on by the pressure gradient force, which is pointing towards low pressure or low heights, and it's being balanced by the Coriolis force, which acts to the right of the movement. So when those forces are in balance, we have geostrophic balance. Now, what affects the pressure gradient force is basically just the gradient that you see plotted here on the chart. So that's kind of constant right there. However, the Coriolis force is dictated by the velocity of the wind, the velocity of the air. When the velocity is high, the Coriolis force is strong. And when the upper level flow is weak, the Coriolis force is weak. So out here in James Bay, like out in this region here, you can see the winds are kind of light and the gradient is kind of spread apart. So the pressure gradient is kind of weak, and because the velocity is weak, the Coriolis force is weak. But over Wisconsin, you can see the contours are very close together. So we have a very strong pressure gradient, and the winds are flowing pretty strong, so we have a very strong Coriolis force. So how does that relate to what's happening in the southwestern U.S.? Let me move the chart over a little bit. Okay, well, it's important to keep in mind that, first of all, there's a very strong jet max right there in the Four Corners area. The air flowing into that jet max is starting out with a very weak velocity, and it's entering this zone where the gradient is very close together. So it's actually moving at a velocity that's a little bit weaker than the pressure gradient that we have in that area set up. So if we draw out the forces, very strong pressure gradient and very weak Coriolis force because the velocity is kind of low. So instead of getting a motion like that, we get a motion kind of like that, kind of pointing across the contours towards the lower pressures. The balance is restored as it accelerates. It picks up kinetic energy as it crosses from the higher heights to the lower heights. because it's kind of like moving towards this partial vacuum. So it's kind of like rolling downhill. It accelerates and gets kinetic energy, and it comes up to speed. And then in the middle of the jet max, the forces are in balance. But departing the jet max, keep in mind the jet max is not moving all that fast, so the air is mostly flowing through it. On the forward side, you've got air with very strong momentum. The velocities are pretty fast there. However, the contours are spreading apart pretty quickly. So if we draw out the forces, we've got a very strong Coriolis force because the velocity is high, but we've got a significantly weakened pressure gradient. So if we draw out the forces, instead of being like this, it's going to be like that. It's going to be pointing towards where the Coriolis force is acting. So instead of going like this, it's actually going like that, and it's crossing to higher heights, and by doing so it trades kinetic energy for potential energy, and it slows down. So this is an area of supergeostrophic flow. I'll put SU here, and this area over here is subgeostrophic flow. A good way to think of it is in terms of velocity. It's like Superman going fast, and this is where the air is moving fast, and on the other side here, this is where it's moving slow. So it's moving slower than the gradient that we have present in that area. So that's a quick refresher to what you see on the charts here, supergeostrophic and subgeostrophic winds. Anyway, that jet max will be coming out into Texas tomorrow. And this is what it looks like by evening there. So that jet max is going to be approaching West Texas there. And let's see where the polar front jet is. It's going to be running something like that. So the better dynamics are going to be along and north of that jet, kind of in this area here, affecting mostly Clayton, Tucumcari, Amarillo, La Junta, and Raton. And of course there is this area back here, the left rear quadrant, that's mostly subsidence in this region here. So probably very good clearing there in Utah and around the Grand Canyon. South of the jet, it's indeterminate there. So we can't really rely on our subjective rules of thumb there. So we're a little bit more dependent there on numerical model output. We do see the difluence across that region. We don't know if that translates to divergence aloft, but it is definitely difluent. There's no question about that. All right, let's head into the other charts. 500 millibar chart. This is another way of visualizing the dynamics aloft. And we roll this forward overnight. There's dawn. And this is about midday here. And it looks like the dynamics in West Texas are really not particularly strong. There's that channeled flow. This has probably been about the second or third system dominated by a channeled dynamics pattern there. Looks like a couple of weak waves kind of rotating around, but most of the changes aloft are going to be due to the movement of the trough over the area. The height falls and pressure falls and temperature falls aloft. Looks like that trough will be moving out into Texas on Saturday there, and then into the southeast U.S. by Sunday. And then behind it you can see the ridging coming into the southern Rockies there. Okay, next chart. This is the moisture at 850 millibars. This is about 5,000 feet. And this is what it looks like right now. Okay, so we do have moisture around the Big Bend area right there, but the best moisture is down to the south in Mexico there. And you can see the dry air filtering into Texas, even the Gulf Coast there. And then we roll that forward and let's see what happens. some moisture return is starting to come up into West Texas there. And then by midday, it looks like that right there. This isn't a very good moisture return. The boundary of the blues right there, the north edge of the blue, that's going to be about 8 degrees Celsius. That's about 46 Fahrenheit, which is, of course, not very high. And then the purple's way down here. That's only about 56 or 57. Yeah, 55 to 56 Fahrenheit. So by evening, at the time of peak heating, this is really all we've got. We've got the 850 millibar dew points only around 50 degrees down there in southwest Texas. I will say that there's some pretty good upslope. This is probably reflective of what's happening in the lower levels. And yeah, quite a bit of upslope, and especially with these cool patterns, that can give us a lot of cloud and some elevated showers this time of year. So we'll see what the charts say about that. And then as we move into Saturday, you can see we start picking up some flow off the Gulf, and some of the better moisture comes up into the San Antonio and Austin area. And we were talking a little bit about thunderstorms in south central Texas, and I think the model is bearing that out a little bit more. Okay, let's go forward to the other charts, and this is the which chart is this? Oh yeah, supercell composite parameter there. So we'll just take a quick look around peak heating tomorrow, indicating a little bit of potential there around Fort Stockton and possibly up to southeastern New Mexico. So this gives us a quick idea where to look for convective potential, but of course moisture, we already know that that's going to be limited. Overnight things decline, of course, with the loss of heating. And then for peak heating on Saturday, there's the situation we've got, and we're painting some values of about 1 to 2 for supercell composite parameter around San Antonio and Austin. Maybe out to Houston a little bit, so we'll have to watch for that, and let's see how things look for Sunday. We're just kind of taking a look ahead. Looks like our better values are a little bit more widespread, affecting around Mobile, Biloxi, and Montgomery there. Okay, next of our College of DuPage charts is the lapse rate. This is indicative of upper level lift. It can also indicate strong cooling aloft. If the cooling is concentrated in the upper levels, your lapse rates will be higher. So this doesn't necessarily equate to lift in the mid levels, but we do like seeing the higher lapse rates where we have a loaded gun sounding. And let's see what it looks like starting out today. Very weak lapse rates across Texas, and we can see that strengthen quite a bit overnight. And looks like higher lapse rates coming in from West Texas tomorrow. And then by peak heating tomorrow, looks like some fairly good lapse rates out there in West Texas. Looks like it is kind of on the low side in North Texas, so I guess we've got a little bit of maybe ridging, shortwave ridge, maybe crossing the area during the day. And then overnight, some pretty good lift moving across areas south of I-20. So we will probably see the SKUTs steepen a little bit going into Saturday morning. And then for peak heating on Saturday, it looks like this. Looks a little bit weaker, so maybe we don't have as much potential Saturday as it looks right there. Yeah, only about a 7 to 8 degree lapse rate there down there in South Texas. Okay, moving forward, let's go into our radar. This is going to be at convection time Friday, going for a little bit of activity around Midland and Pecos, Monahans out in that area. Looks like elevated stuff in Texas and Oklahoma for Friday night, and then Saturday Looks like most of that's elevated, and I'm looking for surface-based convection. And I don't know, maybe a little bit of potential in this area here. Looks like something strong going up around Mineral Wells, but that's kind of far north for surface-based activity. I guess it could be some convection, surface-based convection, because the vectors are kind of facing each other like that. So yeah, maybe around Waco, Stephenville, possibly Saturday we might see something in Texas. We can check that out tomorrow. And then going into Sunday, everything moves east. And it looks like we've just got kind of an MCS there, and probably some of the better cells will be on the tail end in southern Alabama there. And then taking a look at the theta E for tomorrow afternoon, you can see the better parcels are going to be pretty much going up the Rio Grande River, right out there towards Fort Stockton, and we've probably got the warm front kind of down in this area right here. And let's see how things look for Saturday. You can see the moisture and warmer air coming up into Texas. And then by Saturday evening, yeah, I guess we're looking at a warm front from about Houston up to Waco. Looks like a Canadian front coming south, and this is either the dry line or a Pacific front coming in from the west there. So I think we've got a little bit of a warm sector right there around the Austin area, maybe northward to Lampasas and west of Waco. So we'll have to kind of keep an eye on that. And then heading into Sunday, you can see that cold air coming southward, and then by convection time, or by peak heating time, yeah, the best theta E's are going to be in southern Mississippi and southern Alabama right there. Okay, so I think the boundaries are going to look something like that. And there's our warm sector. We can probably check out a few forecast QTs when we start going over some of the pivotal weather products here in a minute. Okay, so that kind of builds up what we're expecting over the next day or so. So we'll go into our conventional charts here. So there's our current chart here showing thickness and isobars. You can see a pretty strong front coming through Arizona there. You can see about three thickness lines back there through Tucson and Phoenix. And then the warm front is going to be kind of shallow, but there it is, kind of banked up against the mountains. Here's our big Canadian high, bringing cool air southward. Upslope flow into Colorado and Wyoming there, and looks pretty quiet out in the Pacific. Looks like a kind of a cold high pressure area there, moving on to the west coast. And let's take a look at the satellite. I didn't even get a chance to look at this. I was kind of in a rush looking at setting up all the charts and everything, but there's our frontal system coming in from southeast Arizona there, or coming into eastern Arizona. And one thing that's very visible there is the dry slot in this region right here. So this is the subsidence acting in this area here. Most of the better mid-level lift is out in this region here, kind of wrapping around the system. And you can kind of see the upper level low right in that area there, just east of Area 51, at around, I don't even think there's any towns out in that region that I know of. Somewhere north of Las Vegas, east of Area 51, kind of in that region. So that's kind of the setup that we have this evening. And if we go down to Mexico, we can see some of the better moisture, some very good stratus and stratocumulus fields. If it wasn't for these mountains, they would be flowing up and joining up with the system here in we would see more of a classic setup with this cloud formation. Okay, let me take a look at chat, see what we got going on this evening. Got Robert Pleasanton, 40, let me move the mic here, 49 degrees in eastern Tennessee. We've got Carl Burkhoff here and Robert Pleasant mentioning Wix Charts site. Got Ron Chalfant in Southern California. And Shirley Keast is here, David Moore. Ryan Toomey's in Southern Florida. Christian Flock, 64 in Yukon, Oklahoma. We have Sue M. in Indiana there, and Carl Burkhoff, Fun with Tech, and Jeff Krob lurking at work. David Holcomb, sunny and 2,300 degrees there. That's pretty warm there. Ryan Toomey's mentioning storms popping up in southwest Texas and New Mexico this evening. Jeff Krob's birthday coming up May 1st. Got Burl H here. Ron Chalfant is plugging my books, and I appreciate that. Yeah, that's at weathergraphics.com. You definitely want to pick up a book if you can, because most of these techniques that I go over, they're in the books, so you want to take a look at that there. Andrew Hotchkiss enjoying the drone footage. Robert Pleasant's birthday is tomorrow. A little discussion there about software. Adam Davis reporting an end to winter in Clarion, mid-50s. There, I'll give you something different to look at. David Lumbert, a beautiful day in northern Arkansas for a paleontology field trip. Saw some ancient weather systems being reflected in the rock formations there. Dylan Ross, 64 in Denver, southeast winds 10 knots. And let me just scroll very quickly through this. Brett Dean, 46 in his area. Mike Estwick is here. And Stephen Garcia Alamia. Electric Dog. Brett Dean mentioning the cloud formations. My chat is kind of jumping everywhere. A lot of times here on YouTube, it tries to update chat while I'm trying to read it, so I get kind of mixed up. I kind of lose my place there. Okay, and yeah, getting to the end here, Mike Estwick asking about 3.02. Yeah, that's pretty much the latest right there. We're working on an update. Fred Reamer likes the discussion on dynamics. Mike Estwick ordered the Scooty book, and I appreciate that. Willie Greenway, first time here. Never knew how important learning the weather is. And yeah, there's definitely a lot to learn. And we try to go over new stuff every day here on Meteorology Lab. Okay. So we can see that system coming out of the western U.S. right there. We're bringing up a lot of mid-level moisture. So we're getting some of that in the form of those clouds that you saw on the opening sequence there. And then we'll take a look out west, showing a lot of subsidence out in that region. You can see that dry slot coming into western Arizona right there. And there's the upper level low. And looks pretty quiet, at least for a couple days, just off of California there. So let's head into the forecast. So we'll go over the NAM using Pivotal Weather's products. And we roll this forward up to tomorrow. This is going to be around the peak heating time tomorrow. And you can see that we are dominated by high pressure all the way out to Texas and the Gulf. High pressure center is right there over the Midwest. So we're getting the wind flow kind of like this right here. And so that spells that our prevailing pattern is cool and dry in Texas. So that's going to be a lot to overcome for storms trying to get going near that frontal system. And we can see it looking at the thickness lines. See, there's 4 thickness lines in red. So that puts the front something like that right there, coming out of El Paso. And then we've got the warm front, kind of like that right there. So even though the map is not showing much right now, we do have at least the potential for some convection at the tip of this warm sector. This whole area here is the warm sector right there. And some of the moisture is actually flowing up along the warm front, kind of in this area. So our zone of potential development is kind of in this area right here. So there's probably a little bit of potential for surface-based storms in the Big Bend area up to Fort Stockton and around Wink and Monahans, kind of in this area right there. And then possibly more storms up into New Mexico, but those are going to be a little bit more elevated. But there will be some upslope potential in that region. I'm sure there might be a few chasers out in that area. Storms will be moving eastward, and they'll be crossing over that cold dome, and they'll become elevated overnight. But we are expecting showers around Oklahoma City tomorrow night, and then moving into Abilene, in Wichita Falls, and eventually Dallas during the morning hours. But again, that's going to be all elevated there. We can see the low is still out there to the west, and it's probably going to bring that warm front, maybe something like that right there. And then by the time of max heating on Saturday, this will be our situation. And looks like we still have a low out to the west there around San Angelo and around Brady and Eden. I'm going to go something like that right there. I'm not really clear on where that front is. I'm going to kind of put it like that. But you can see the cusp of that warm sector is on the Edwards Plateau and near the hill country. So we do have some potential just to the east of that low there for some surface-based storms. It's just going to depend on how much heating we get and how much help there is aloft. Let me go ahead and give you a forecast sounding for around maybe Alano, Texas. That's just northwest of Austin. And this is what we're looking at. We do have the moisture there. See, we start out with 62. Up at 3,000 feet, we've got still upper 50s, which is not bad. However, let's see here. I'm trying to figure out what temperature to go with. I'm going to go with a partial temperature, maybe 71. Yeah, you can just follow this yellow line. So that's our lifted parcel, and it looks like our cape is going to be kind of limited, just a very skinny layer of cape, and you can see the values they're going with are only about 500 to 1,000 cape. So that's not very high, but for storms that do get going, the photograph does indicate we've got a little bit of 0 through 1 kilometer shear. So that'll pretty much sweep out this entire area here. That's enough for rotating storms, definitely. So, yeah, Saturday it's just going to come down to where there's mesoscale accidents west of I-35, maybe northwest of Austin, somewhere in the Colorado River Basin there. All right, let's see if it picks up that convection. Yeah, there's those cells right there around Stephenville, maybe the Brownwood area. But remember that the instability is going to be kind of limited. Anyway, the Canadian front will be sweeping south, and that'll really clear things out. That's just kind of a big wedge of cold air that's driving southward as that low-pressure system starts moving to the east. Once that's to the east, that's going to bring all the cold air southward. So that's going to happen overnight on Saturday. And looks like the NAM does go for a little bit of forced convection in East Texas. And then we come up with our next round on Sunday for the Mississippi and Alabama area. So by max heating on Sunday, we're going to be looking like this. Probably some of the better, stronger storms are going to be close to the coast in that region right there. Let me move out to southeast Alabama around Enterprise and take a look at the forecast QT for Sunday afternoon. And yeah, we do have a hook-shaped hodograph. So there is potential there for severe convection. And, yeah, better instability there. 1500 Cape. So severe weather potential should be going up there for Sunday. And then things will be moving eastward, and then we will take a look at the GFS. Okay, so here goes our storm. This is going to be Saturday. You can see it moving eastward overnight. This is Saturday night, about midnight. And there it is moving into Mississippi there. So that high pressure in this region here, it's just kind of wrapping around the backside of that low, kind of like that. Anyway, that continues pushing east. So now I'm kind of focusing on this area. Looks like another outbreak of cold air coming south. The origin of this, probably western Canada there. So this is coming kind of from this area right there. This is on Tuesday. And there it goes, sweeping southeastward right there. 1023 millibar high, pushing that system. And then it'll be moving through Texas on Wednesday. And then we'll be clear around midweek. Looks like the Gulf is opening up, so maybe a chance for a few thunderstorms out in West Texas on Thursday and Friday. However, it looks like, see, the air mass looks kind of cold there around Friday. You can see that this high just kind of pushes that gradient out to the west, kind of like that against the mountains. So we're kind of back to the kind of pattern that we've got going on right now. Gulf opens up a little bit once again for Saturday, the 29th. And then our next system appears to be this next one here coming in for Tuesday the 1st. So we'll watch for some storms there in the Panhandle on the 1st. And then the next round, there it is, coming in there for the 3rd. And that may be a little bit more like a typical springtime situation there. So for that system, the 3rd, we're going to be looking at probably the Panhandles and adjacent areas in New Mexico and Colorado. And that comes to the end of our GFS run. So that is the forecast. All right, let me take one last look at chat here. Brett Dean says, hit the like button. Christian Flock says, can I get the SKU-T autographed? We can give it a try, but we'll just have to see if we're able to, just put a comment in your order, and we'll try to do that, but we can't guarantee it due to the way we have things set up. Jeff Krob says, would that SKU-T be favorable for LP supercells? We'd have to look at the wind profile aloft, but maybe that's a good question for tomorrow there. And I'm getting out of sync here with the messages. Anyway, all right, I'm going to go ahead and wrap things up. I think that's pretty much everything. But anyway, I appreciate you all joining the webcast, and hopefully we will see you tomorrow, and we'll take a look at the situation out there in West Texas. All right, thanks, guys. We'll see you tomorrow.